Crafty Hope here, and welcome. I am about to work, or I think I'm about to work on my week 9 prompt project for Crafty Hope prompts. If you have not seen this before, welcome. And I'm going to explain a little bit of this, but not much. I will refer you to my week 9 card making video. I'll put that up there for you. But I'm building a prompt deck using 3 prompts a week that I draw, and I make a prompt card. So this was my week 9 prompt card with the prompts Washi, Eco Dye Fabric, and Fairy. So I made this with those prompts. And now it's time for me to use those prompts to create a project that's not just the card. And it hit me the other day. I was sitting around folding some papers. I have lots of scrap papers, and every once in a while I will take them and fold them and turn them into junk journals. And I have been itching for several small junk journals to just like sketch and stuff in. So I had those papers, started folding them, and then I was like, hey, I could make that my prompt project for this week. So I think that's what I'm going to do for at least one of them. So I'll tell you what I've pulled out for washi. I've got these tissue tapes from Tim Holtz. I love these. They can get a little rippy because they are tissue, but I've also got this like handy bin that's got my neutral, like black and whites and browns washi tape, and I've got another one of these that's a bit more full with my colorful ones. So for Eco Dye Fabric, I have this bin of fabrics that have like my Eco and Rust dyes in them. So I'm going to possibly find some fabric in here that will work for junk journal cover, at least one of them. So that's, I'm going to have to figure out which ones. I may end up with a Rust dye. I don't know yet. I'll have to see what I've got here that would be fun and how I want to do that. And then for Fairy, y'all, I haven't figured that out yet. I don't even know how to get Fairy in there. I may somehow stamp an image, put it on the cover. I've got it's a broken bezel. It doesn't have the loop at the top that I can put some kind of fairy something in it and put that on the cover somehow. I'm not sure. We're going to get to that if I decide to share this with you. But this is where I'm going to start, I think, for my prompt project. Let me move some of this around. This is my whole big bin. And I want to tell you a little bit about these signatures that I have folded. Now, these are probably not signatures. This may get split. I think this one might stay as a single signature. It's not too thick. But I had this huge stack of like scrap papers that were fairly large and weren't getting used off to the side. And I thought, well, what if I just make them junk journals? And so a couple days ago, I just sat down and started folding them all. Then from there, I sorted them by size. So these are all the larger ones here that, like I said, I think could be one book, one junk journal book. And then I did smaller ones. So I've got 3 little stacks here that are about the same size, and then one that's a bit smaller. And I think these can all be individual books too, but these are so cram-packed that I'll probably have to split them down. So if you don't know much about bookbinding or whatever, a single folded sheet of paper like this, folded in half, that's a folio. When you split them into little sections, little stacks that are sewn together, or in some cases stapled or something like that, that's a signature. So I think I have more than one signature here. So I might be able to like take this and make 2 signatures for a book. I think I'm going to split that down just a little bit more. But that's just kind of the general idea there. I know that some of these papers I need to secure the centers where they've been folded because some of these papers are really fragile. And that's what I was going to use the washi for, I think, was to go through and alter some of these. Some of them just put washi on it as a decorative thing, cover up things. But like some of these papers, like this is a, what do you call it? A deli paper that's been jelly printed. And I think it's maybe too delicate and would need something down the center to just secure it. So I'll possibly just put a thing of washi tape down the center. That's my thinking. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I am just going to, I think, randomly pick one of these stacks. I'm trying to decide. I kind of just want to start with the little one and go from there. I don't know, it may be too little. I want something y'all can see too. So I'm going to pick one of these stacks. I know there was one that absolutely needed repairing, and I don't know where that one is. So, yeah. There's the crux of it. I, sat there and folded all of these. All right, so I'm just going to pick one and get to it. The first thing I did was go through this and count all of the pages so that I could divide them into individual signatures. I found that there were 19 pages or folios, and y'all, that's just such an odd number. But I did break it down into 3 signatures, 2 of them with 6 folios and 1 with 7, just to be done with it, because I like having 3 or an odd number of signatures so that you have a center one, and that makes it easier sometimes when you're kind of freewheeling it and putting a junk journal together. I'm doing less of the freewheeling with this one simply because I'm trying to show y'all how to do it, so it's going to be a little more exact than I would normally go about this process. So as you can see, I'm going through each of these folios and looking at the pages. I'm doing a couple different things. I'm deciding on the orientation. I think for the most part, I kept them going in the same direction that I found them in. But I'm also taking that washi tape that I've got, the tissue tape, and whatever else is in that jar, and putting it down the center lines just to, when I go to stitch this later, to make sure that these papers don't tear and or eventually fall out of my junk journal. So for the most part, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do one other thing here in one of the signatures. We'll get to that. And as I finish each signature, I'm coming in with a bone folder and just tightening up that fold of them all together so that it's nice and tight. So I'll let you see this again. I'm flipping or pulling out each page, kind of looking at that center fold. If it feels fragile, like this one already had a tear in it. And I was like, so yeah, that is definitely going to need some repair. So I'll pull up some washi, and you can see some of y'all, I'm not super careful when I tear my washi. Sometimes it gets scraggly. And I'm not picking the same thing, but I am glad that I stuck with my neutrals for this. That way, I'm not, I don't know. One of the benefits of a junk journal is that you, for the most part, already have something on some of these pages. But at the same time, I didn't want anything to clash too much, and I didn't want to have to make a whole lot of decisions as I did this and put the washi down. So with the neutrals, my biggest decision is just grab one. I don't have to decide, well, what color goes with this and would work best. I'm just getting these neutral tissue tapes, and they're browns and grays and blacks, and it's fine. It works. It doesn't matter. I don't have to look at this piece with the turquoise on it and go, well, I don't know that I want an orange or a purple on, not making those decisions. And you can see that I am putting the washi on both sides, or the washi tape on both sides of these papers, just to really give it that extra sense of stability. But I'm not super concerned about that, like that went too far up. So I just folded it over. That's the great thing about using the washi tape. Just stick it wherever. So there is number 2 finished. And then we'll get into the last signature. And I was going to cut this short or speed this up a little bit for y'all. But this one little thing I do here, I've got one page in here that is a little bit longer than my other pages. This one here. So I decide to just fold it over. I'm going to make a little tuck spot and have that done with my washi. I'm going to use some of the tissue tape, and I think some that I haven't used before. And I start by tearing off a big piece. I know that was a big mistake because it ends up sticking all together. But I tried to go along that top edge of the paper, and that didn't really work. I realized what I really wanted to do was fold it over. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. But I have to untangle this tape first. So I let it go up and then I fold it up and over the top of the page, just like that. And so I'll make that a little bit easier on the second side for my little tuck spot. So if some of your papers are too big, like too tall, remember that you can just fold them up and use some washi or some glue or something and make you a little pocket. Yeah, it'll work. So just use some papers that you have and have fun with making that process. Once I got through all my pages and got them folded, I grabbed my piece of eco-dyed fabric and I'm deciding how big I want this to be. So I'm going to use this as a cover. So I decided to go ahead and basically tear it into quarters, and that's gonna be what works best. I kinda wish I had left, I don't know, the long piece long because that'll come in later. I mean, not desperately so, but just enough that I was like, well, maybe I should have. So that covers the whole thing, gives it a little bit of extra room, and I'm going to square it up just a little by tearing it down. I can tell that it was a bit wonky. It's probably still a bit wonky, but that's okay. I am not exact when it comes to these things. So I want something that's a little bit sturdier than both the papers that are in there and that fabric. So I grabbed, this is like one of the big size file folders. I don't know if they're legal size but they're not regular, like, what do you call it? I don't know. They're not like a regular size file folder. And so if you have something, some cardboard or something like that, this would work fine with that too. I was just using what was handy. So I'm going to grab a pencil here and outline the fabric. Yeah, we see me thinking there. I was like, how do I want to do this? I'm just outlining the fabric and I'm going to cut down that file folder. And you see my outline is not fantastic. It's not great. I didn't care if there was a little bit of overlap, but the big thing is I don't want that file folder to show. So if the fabric's still bigger, fine, whatever. And then I'm going to grab a glue stick. This is my Oohoo glue stick, and I am just going to tack down my fabric. And you can see that that fabric has not been ironed. It's a little scraggly, but as I put it down on top of that glue stick, I'm just kind of smoothing it out, making sure it sticks down. My big thing is just to tack it down because I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and go around it, around the outside edge twice, so that will make sure that fabric is stuck down to my file folder. Now, I will admit, I wish I had used something a little bit sturdier than the file folder, but it's fine. If I had a smaller journal, the file folder would work great, but since this one's a little bit larger, it's a little floppy, but it's going to be fine. This is just a little junk journal that I want to sketch around in. It's not a huge deal. It really isn't. Use what you have. Don't go buying something special. All right, here you can see I went around the outside to tack down that. And now I am going to start on turning this into a cover. So I futz around with this for a little bit and finally decide to grab, this is a scoreboard. It is a little bit of overkill. I could do this about the same thing with a ruler, but I'm going to fold my cover in half, find the center, put that center line down on, I put it on the 6 just because that's the middle of the board, and then scored that. And then I went 3 little ticks over. So I don't even know. I think it was 3 little ticks. And these are in like 1/16. So I can't even tell you, it's 3/16 of an inch over, something like that, to get my 3 lines for my 3 signatures. But then I decided to go on either side of that another 3 ticks just to have my outside edges of where I'm going to fold my journal. So there I'm folding those 2 outside edges, and you again use a ruler and just some kind of like a mechanical pencil without the without the lead out or something like that, just to get you some score lines, or draw the lines and fold it. It's not a big deal. Big thing is if you're just going to do one, fold it in half and there, you've got it. You're done. Now I'm making a little template using just some scrap of that file folder, and making sure it's as tall or no taller than my my journal there, and I'm going to find the center of it by folding it. You can't see that, but I folded it in half here in a second. I'm trimming, kind of squaring up the edges and making sure I point which way is the top and up. And now I fold it in half so I know where the center of that is. And I'll put a dot there and then come down a little bit from the top and up a little bit from the bottom and make another mark. So those are my 3 marks for my signature. Now get you a pokey tool of some kind. I've got this Tim Holtz one, or this one from the Dollar Tree, or even a T-pen works fine, or an awl or something like that. So you can poke your holes in both your signature and your cover. I've got a piece of like foam from some kind of packaging there and some big paper clips. You could use binder clips or something like that, or paper clip. I mean, what do you call them? Clothespins if you need to. Just something to hold your signatures together. And I'm using, like I said, this foam. You can use an old book or a foam book. There are things called bookbinding cradles that are great if you've got one of those. But get it all placed. And y'all, this is not the best version. This is not how I would normally do this. But I'm going ahead and pre-poking my holes in that first signature, and then I'm going to put it on my cover. And I decide this is going to be the first signature in there. So I'm lining it with my first line. Now, if I was doing this willy-nilly the way I usually do things, I would start in the center, and I would probably not have even made that template. I would have just poked some holes and then put my needle with my thread through. I'm not doing it for y'all. I'm going to show y'all. You line up your line on that score line, and you're going to poke your holes through all the way through your cover, just like that. The second signature, you'll get a better idea of what I mean. And I'm using the pokey tool and not my needle, just because it gives me a little more pressure. Now get some wax linen cord and measure about 3 of the height of your signature. I go a little bit more than that for a little bit extra, and then thread your needle. You're going to want a nice chunky needle for this. Now we're going to do a pamphlet stitch, and so you're going to go in through your center hole. Make sure you go through all of the pages of your signature and your cover, and then go back through the top hole back to the inside. And when you do this, make sure you're not poking new holes. Go through the holes you've already poked. Now then go back in through your bottom hole, or go through your bottom hole, and then back through your center hole. Just like this. And make sure when you pull it back through that center hole, your thread is on the other side of that center one. So you have one on each side of your thread. And then you're going to just tie a double knot and trim that. Like I said, I'm going to do this again so you can see it. We're going to do the center one next. I would never do the outside edges and then the center one. Either work from one side to the other, or start in the center and work out when you do this. Just, that's how I would do it. All right, so now for the second one, I am clipping up my signature to keep it in place, and I'm going to line it on that middle score line, which is my second score line. And I'll grab another paper clip and clip it to my cover, making sure I'm on that score line and clipping it to the cover so nothing moves. I'll get my little template there, line it up where I want it, and then poke my holes so that all of that is all lined up perfectly nicely. Then I'll get my wax, making sure my holes went through my cover. I'll get my wax linen cord, measure 3, 1, 2, 3, plus a little extra, trim my cord, and then thread my needle. The wax linen cord works great with this. I think there are other bookbinding threads you can use, but the wax linen is pretty fabulous. Now from your inside, pull your cord through the outside, leave a tail, and that's in the center hole. Then go through your top hole from the outside to the inside. Again, be careful that you're not poking no holes. Then go down from the inside to the outside, into your bottom hole, and then back into your center hole, making sure your thread is on the other side of that center thread. And my tail was a little too long there. And then you're going to tie a double knot, making sure those threads are on either side of that center line, and then trim it. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with the third folio. So, and I'm not going to make y'all watch that again. If you have questions, let me know, or you can rewind that and watch it again. All right, so there I realized my cover was a little floppy on the edges, so I'm going to fold it in and kind of do the same thing that I did with that other little tuck spot. I'm creating basically a tuck spot on here, and I'll take it to the sewing machine and sew the edges just across the top of that a couple times, not down it, just back and forth to hold those down so I have a little tuck spot. Now my camera was not on for this next spot, so I want to show you I did take that little bezel and I took this hole punch that has a bunch of circles. One of them happens to be the right size for that bezel, and I had a print out that had a fairy on it. There's my fairy. I cut that out and used Mod Podge to put my fairy inside that bezel and then seal the top of it as well. That's all that happened. I'm sorry that I don't know how I ended up without my camera on, but yeah, that happened. So what I'm going to do, I thought I was going to use this Jelly Roll Stardust. It's a sparkly like glitter pen to put some glitter in there, but it didn't really work, and so it's not a big deal. But the big thing is I'm using some clear crackle paste. So I've got my little palette knife here, and I'm going to scrape up some of that clear crackle paste and just spread it inside my bezel. So I'm starting with that palette knife just to get it kind of in there, but I'll end up using my finger to help smooth it out a little. Getting it a little thick because remember, the thicker you put your crackle in, the bigger your crackles are. The thinner it is, the smaller your crackles. So I left it to dry overnight, and y'all, I've got some beautiful crackles. Now I thought on this for a while, and I decided to add some rust to this. So I've got a couple of big rusty washers, and I knew I wanted to put this on the front of my journal and kind of make it my closure. And I thought over this over like a day and a half how I wanted to do this. And basically I'm creating a buckle of sorts. It's not completely because it doesn't function that way, but you'll see it's like a slider piece. So I'm gluing the bezeled fairy with the crackle onto these two rusty washers, just using some E6000. I'm making sure that those washers are touching and all of that is down, and I leave that to dry for like a day. Now while it is drying, I tore off a strip of my Eco Dye fabric, and I'm folding it in half and then stitching it down one side to create a tube. And then I've got some elastic, and I'm going to thread that elastic into my tube. I'm going to fast forward through this so you do not have to watch me do it. But once it comes out the other side, I'll go ahead and put that aside. And yeah, well, I let that everything dry, and I thought on this, I wanted my bezel to be good and dry and secured to those washers. So I cinched up the fabric a little bit and trimmed my elastic, and then I took it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew just down the center a little bit so that that elastic doesn't slip out of my little tube. And now I'm going to weave it behind so put it in one side of those rusty washers and then up out the other. Y'all, I love this accent so much. Like I said, it was one of those things that I was driving down the road and it came to me that I wanted to try this. So now I'm making sure my stitches is kind of hidden in the back, and then I'm making sure it fits around my journal. This is a little bit big for I should have cut my elastic a little bit smaller, and I may go back and do that because I can do that. But I'm stitching it together with just some embroidery floss, making sure it makes just a ring. Of course, my floss came out of my needle, but I'm just doing a couple stitches to make sure my embroidery floss is secure and will stay how it is. And I'm leaving it exposed just so it has that room to stretch. But like I said, I may trim it down because this ended up being a little big for my book. But if my book does get chunky, I do have a little bit room for it to stretch. And y'all, really, this is all it is. I'm going to show y'all how this looks all put together, but there is my eco print fabric, my washi, and my fairy combined into one project, which is this fun junk journal with a unique closure. And there's plenty of room on the outside of this for me to add other things if I want to later, but for now, I'm keeping it simple. I hope you like this prompt project. If you are playing along, make sure you use the hashtag CraftyHopePrompts. And let me know if you have any questions. Give me a thumbs up if you like this, and make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, y'all. Bye.